So let us continue. Uh, I welcome you all to this session on English poetry, BA Part 3, Special English. In the last few sessions, we were discussing about characteristic features of Elizabethan poetry and came across different characteristic features of Elizabethan poetry. In the last session, we came to know, we learned that it is marked with a sonnet form because sonnet was introduced or was a Italian poetry form which was introduced into England by Surrey and Watt, and afterward it becomes a very uh, dominant forms of poetry during this period, during this time. We learned in the last session that lyric and narrative poetry was also very common poetry form of this particular period. We also learn in the last lecture that as this poetry is a poetry of emotions, instead of following the poetic traditions of a Greek and Roman masters, they start using blank verse. We also come to know that, and we have also seen when we were discussing about the characteristic features of Elizabethan literature or Elizabethan period, that this is the period known as English Renaissance. So this spirit of Renaissance also influences a lot on this period, on the creativity of this period. These people start exploring the classical texts in their poetry. I also discussed with you in the last session that Caxton establishes his first printing press in Westminster, and he started publishing classical texts. 100 classical titles were published, translated and published by Caxton, and it is distributed in the Europe. It boosted the spirit of Renaissance, and as a result of that, common people get also made available with the classical text, and as they read classical texts, they also borrow material from the classical texts. In the last session, we also learned that this is the period of nationalism, this is the period of humanism, this is the period of a patriotism. We learned that this is the period in which the England was establishing its colony and different continents, discovering different remote parts of the world. World map is expanding, and therefore it created a nationalist kind of feeling spirit among the public, and it is depicted in a poetry. It is also the case with the humanism, as we see that there is a shift from orthodox Catholic religion to the more tolerant Protestant. It accept the humanism, Christian humanism, and this humanism is also depicted into the literature, where man becomes more important than the church and from the pope. So this is also one of the major characteristics of a Elizabethan poetry. Then in the last session, we learned that the poetry was marked by romantic exuberance, creativity, imagination, experimentation, intense emotions, and metaphors. And all these things created a very vibrant kind of literary tradition that is known today as a Elizabethan literature. This poetry, you can see that extensive use of metaphors, repetition, puns, and paradoxes were used, and these such a kind of use is also emerged as one of the very significant point of inspiration or demonstration of how to use such kind of poetic devices in poetry. So many poets get influenced, get inspiration from such a kind of use. The metaphors is typically used to compare woman to object of a rare and exotic beauty. So you can see this is the period of emotions. This is the period where the personal emotions for a person, personal emotion for a flower. You can see my love is like a red, red rose. Such kind of vivid kind of imagination is there, and for that purpose they were using metaphors, and the metaphors were typically used to compare woman to object of a rare and exotic beauty. They try to exaggerate, they try to emphasize the beauty of a woman with the rare beauty of a rare and exotic beauty of an object. So this is what a metaphor is used. Then the repetition, I told you that repetition is also used very extensively in this particular poetry, and repetition exists so as to develop the deepen the theme of poetry. So to deepen the theme of the poetry, they were using the repetition. This is also a very influential kind of a poetic uh, repetition is also very important kind of a poetic device used in this particular period. Such a kind of device is also used in drama. I remember one Shakespeare's play Macbeth, and there are a scene where three witches were singing song, and the lines are like double, double, triple, double, double, triple the trouble, double double triple the trouble. Such kind of lines were there. So repetitions is also repetition is also one of the very significant and very influential kind of uh, poetic device used in this poetry. Then use of puns is also marked in this particular poetry. The use of pun existed so as to develop a play on words given many words in the English language typically have multiple meanings. So they were using a words with a double meaning. So they were using a pun extensively. And lastly, the paradoxes. You can see they were also using paradoxes in their poetry to emphasize their thematic concerns. So in the last session, we have learned all these things. So now let us begin with this PPT that I have prepared for you for so many days. I want to show you this, but there are several things I want to explore. I want to speak with you, so I go on exploring that, and this PPT remain the same. So say let's begin with this PPT. Uh, this is the characteristics of Elizabethan poetry, and these are more detailed kind of exploration of the characteristics. All these things we have already explored in my in two lectures. Already we have discussed the characteristic features of Elizabethan poetry. So let us now once again begin with this maybe certain repetitions, but you can see that this is not just repetitions, but I want to emphasize certain things because we are the students of literature, and we are supposed to criticize, or we have to produce a critical comprehension of the poetry, and it is possible only for us to understand certain things about the period, certain things about the poetry, certain things about the historical development of a genre. So let us begin with the with this PPT. See, poetry is a subgenre of literature. So it witnessed the upsurge in literary production which took place during Renaissance. Of course, yes, this English Renaissance, this period of English Renaissance, you can see it witnessed the upsurge. So, as I told you, why this witnessed the upsurge? Because there are many people who can write and who can read and who can write. As a common public start contributing to the literature, the poetry witnessed the upsurge, and even in this particular period, poetry is very popular. Where poetry is very famous uh, literary genre, as most of the people, instead of trying their hands in a drama, they very easily go for a poetry. So this in this particular period, as due to the mass education, as most of the common public start writing and reading of a poetry, they start uh, writing in a subgenre of poetry, and this poetry witnessed the upsurge. Then the poetry is a particular had a great progression in terms of a form and theme. As I told you, we have already discussed this point. that progression in terms of form and theme. So this is the period of experimentation. And about the theme, you can see that this is the period of a shift. We were moving from the themes only or exclusively for aristocratic society, aristocratic community, to the common public. And this as the shift of a poetry moves from aristocratic society to the common public, it gets a wide range of themes, wide range of thematic concerns. And as a result of that, you can see that there is a progression of a form and theme. The new kind of themes also requires a new experimentation in the form, and reciprocally they both developed in this particular period. Form and theme gets a great had a great progression in this particular period. So therefore Elizabethan poetry is also known as experimentation and forms, and it is also known for its wide range of themes. So as it is a written by a common man for a common public, it also explored a wide range of thematic concerns. Instead of idealism, instead of exploring the thematic concerns, instead of exploring a religious dictum, what they do, they try start exploring the common life, and as a result of that, they explore a wide range of thematic concern. The next point, see, the most predominant poetic type was a lyrical poetry. So we will also going into details of a lyrical poetry. We are also going into details of a types of a lyrical poetry. We will invest one or two lectures on types of lyrical poetry. Our prime or exclusive concern is on a sonnet, but I think that if we want to understand Elizabethan poetry, we should understand all lyrical types that were significantly contributed in this particular period. So we will invest two more lectures on lyrical types of a poetry, uh, and our exclusive focus in this lecture also I want to focus on a Elizabethan sonnet, because we are also supposed to write a short note or write a broad answer type question on a Elizabethan sonnet or sonnet form, because the three poems that were prescribed to you are sonnets. So this is very important part. But before going again into the details of a sonnet form, I would like to introduce you types of lyrical poetry that will be very useful for you in future to understand this particular period. So in this period, lyrical poetry is a very predominant poetic type. It is used by many of the people, many of the writers, which was at first literally represented into form of a sonnet. Actually, yes, of course, you can see. And as a result of that, sonnet appears as a very dominant form of poetry in Elizabethan poetry. Sonnet is an icon for the Elizabethan poetry, as the majority of writers adapted and adopted adapted this newly borrowed style of a poetry. And this newly borrowed style of poetry, it is borrowed from Italy. It is borrowed from Petrarch, that is an Italian sonneteer. So this become a very significant poetic lyrical type in this particular period. A sonnet. What is sonnet? Sonnet is a this is again a very surface level introduction of the sonnet. We will go into detail of all these things. We will we will discuss this particular point with actual sonnets. That is also very important to realize the characteristic features of sonnet into the actual sonnet. So see, sonnet, what is sonnet? Sonnet is a 14 line poem written in iambic pentameter, and it is originated in Italy. What is iambic pentameter and what is why it is a 14 line, we will discuss it in detail when we were thinking or when we were dealing exclusively with a sonnet type. Here we were more concerned with the characteristic of a Elizabethan poetry. So this is what a 14 line poem written in iambic pentameter, and it's originated in Italy, as I told you. Italian sonnet, more commonly known as a Petrarchan sonnet. So when we think about sonnet, we have two categories of sonnet. We have to learn two categories of sonnet. One is a Petrarchan sonnet and second is a English sonnet. So we will see the difference even between Petrarchan sonnet and uh, English sonnet. It is not very difficult one to understand. Was originally invented by Italian poet named Petrarch. The Petrarchan sonnet is divided into two parts, that is the two stanzas, octave and sessex. So this is technical terms, octave and sessex. See what is octave? Octave is the 8-line stanza consisting the first part of a Petrarchan sonnet and where the argument is introduced. So this is again an argumentative type of a poetry. So in the first part of a Petrarchan sonnet, that is an octave, an argument is made. So poet make an argument. The sesset, that is a 6 line, that is a 6 line stanza consisting the second part of the sonnet, and where the argument is following down till reaching the final resolution of the poet. So in the next 6 lines, what he do? He try to convince you to follow his argument or to accept his argument, and for that purpose he uses such kind of things. Sorry, two kind of, one is argument and then elaboration in a octave lines. So the octave and sesect in the 8 or 9 lines. So we will discuss between octave and sesect a volet or turn occur to mark a shift in ongoing argument, and there is again a shift in ongoing argument, that twist in argument. We will see it when you can understand all these things when you read the actual Petrarchan sonnet. Then only it is possible for you to learn what kind of argument is there in octave and what kind of elaboration is there in sestet. We will learn it in detail when we were exclusively focusing on a lyrical type sonnet. Then Sir Thomas Watt was the first to introduce the Italian sonnets, that is a Petrarchan sonnet, into English. So this Watt and Surrey, there are two people who migrated to the Italy. They get influenced there with a Petrarchan sonnet form, and they bring with them the English sonnet, this Italian sonnet with them, and they try to, or they explore this form in English. And as they explore this form in English, it becomes immediately very famous, very popular among the English writers. So, Sir Thomas Watt was the first to introduce the Italian sonnets into English as a mere translated version of Italian sonnets. So, they translate it into the English language, and as the people read it, they get influenced by this type of sonnet. They feel that it is a very easy one to write a poetry, so they accept it, adapt it, and start writing a poetry in the sonnet form. So far, English sonnet had a form very similar to the Italian sonnet, but as they follow or as they accept the Italian sonnet, they also make certain changes in uh, structure of the sonnet. So later on, English sonnets was developed and restructured at the hands of many English Elizabethan poets. See, that is Henry Howard, Edmund Spenser. Edmund Spenser Amorotti is a very famous sonnet collection of the period. And William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare also write many sonnets, sonnets of his white friend and a black lady. So that is also very famous one. Still, some poets prefer the Italian form of sonnet, but English form of sonnet becomes very significant type. So see, Petrarchan, then Spenserian, and then Shakespearean. We have three types of sonnets. Basically, the Shakespearean and Spenserian sonnets were known as an English sonnets, and Petrarchan sonnet is known as an Italian sonnet because Petrarch is an Italian poet. Spenser and Shakespeare were English poets. So the Petrarchan sonnet consists of octave and sestet and rhyming A B B A A B B A C D E C D E or C D C C D C. you will understand this rhyme when you actually see the poem. Otherwise you may feel that it is a very difficult one. This is not a very difficult one, it is a very easy one to understand. When we were discussing sonnet form exclusively and deals with uh, actual sonnets, you will understand that what is mean by this ABBA or ABBA or CDE CDE. That is a rhyme, and it is very easy to understand what is the rhyme one. So Petrarchan sonnet is divided into two parts. One is octave, that is 8 lines, and a suspect, that is a 6 line. Octave is a argument, and suspect is a elaboration of that argument into 6 lines. And its rhyme scheme is a very typical one. It is ABBA, ABBA, CDE, CDE, or many times it is a CDC, CDC. Sorry, CDC, DCD. So this is what a Petrarchan sonnet is. When it is adapted by a Spenser, Edmund Spenser, as I told you, that is Amerotti is very famous sonnet collection of this particular period. It consists of three quatrains instead of two. He divided sonnet into three quatrains. See, it consists of a three quatrains and couplet rhyming. So two quatrains and then again a couplet. So 4 4 plus 2. See what is it? ABBA, sorry, ABAB, BCBC, and EE. So it consists of a three quatrains and a couplet rhyming ABAB, BCBC, and EE. So three quatrains of a 4 lines and then couplet of a 2 lines. So this is a Spenserian sonnet. Then Shakespearean sonnet, which is also known as an English sonnet, similar to the Spenserian sonnet, which follows into three quatrains and couplet, but has a different rhyme scheme. And what is it? ABAB, BC, sorry, ABAB, CD, CD, EF, EF, and GG. So this is what characteristics Elizabethan, sorry, Petrarchan sonnet and English sonnet. We will discuss in detail about all these things in the upcoming lectures. We will stop here, continue the same in the next session. Next session we will continue with major thematic concern of the poetry and major poets of Elizabethan poetry, and then we will in the next session, that it may be the in the next session season, we will begin with lyrical types that I want to discuss with you in detail. Instead of only mentioning the name, we will understand definitions and characteristic features of all these things. So we will stop here, continue the same in the next session. We were discussing characteristic features of a Elizabethan poetry. Thank you for listening.